Bienvenidos, Ushamdi, and welcome Anne Arundel Community College learners from the spring 2023 semester taking the CTS-233 Section 400 Network Programmability course. This is the Cisco Networking Academy's DEVASC 200-901 Certification Exam Preparation course, and in this video tutorial we're going to be doing a deep dive into Lab 8.3.6, where you are going to learn some really cool stuff. We're going to be using NETCONF to not only access but configure a Cisco IOSXE device, and that IOSXE device is in fact our CSR1kv. Now, not only are we going to be accessing and configuring that device using NETCONF, I've got a couple of Python scripts that I'll show you that can pull some information off of the device for us as well. And then you could extend and modify the functionality as you see fit. And so this is really what model-driven programmability is all about. And so what is the model that we're talking about? Well, the model we're talking about is Yang, right? Yet another next generation. And Yang is, think of it like a blueprint. So all these Cisco devices that we work on, there's some kind of a blueprint that describes how that device is built, right? And what the different bells and whistles that that device might have. And that's our Yang data model. And that data model is what describes that Cisco router, that Cisco switch, whatever the case may be. And so that model-driven programmability is based on that Yang model that defines and describes the Cisco device. And so now the question is, so how do we interact with that model, right? And NETCONF is one of the ways that we can do that. Now, some of the differences between NETCONF and RESTCONF, and this is going to become important. Now, NETCONF, we're going to be using a Python script, and we're going to be using XML and SSH to connect to the device. And so that's how NETCONF is going to interface with that model-driven programmability using that Yang model for the Cisco CSR1kv. We're going to have a Python script. It's going to use SSH, and again, it's all about XML. Now, RESTCONF, on the other hand, we are not using SSH. We're using TLS because RESTCONF, as you might have guessed, stands for RESTful configuration of that device. And, you know, NETCONF is just the network configuration protocol. So RESTCONF is RESTful network configuration protocol. And we're going to be using TLS or HTTPS, right? Just like we've always done with the previous module 4 activities, as we were using RESTful GET request or PUT request or whatever the case may be, right? So that's the difference between the two. So let's dive in. We've got everything teed up and ready to go here. And so as you can see, I've got some information. So I've got everything teed up and ready to go here. So let's go ahead and dive in. I've got everything teed up and ready to go here. We've got some really cool stuff that we're going to be taking a look at. So with that lab, right, one of the first things I want you to do is to ping the CSR1kv. So we'll say 192.168.1.129. Now they show you that 192.168.56 address, but the bottom line is if you're running in VMware, you're probably going to be seeing a different IP address if you're using the attached network interface. They even want us to go ahead and do a quick SSH as the user Cisco. And again, we're just kind of checking connectivity, and this is something good for you to do before you start running those Python scripts. And the password's just Cisco123 !, and there we are. So I'm on the CSR1kv. You can see the host name says CSR1kv, and that's going to be critical because that's one of the things that we're going to be changing. All right, so before we exit, actually, let's go ahead and see, do we have the NETCONF NC SSHD, right? Remember, the SSHD daemon for NETCONF isn't running. So how do we see that? Well, I can say show platform software Yang management proc or process. Hit enter, and this is exactly what we're looking for. The NETCONF SSHD process is running on our CSR1kv. And that, again, remember, with NETCONF, it's all about XML, it's all about SSH. That's how we're connecting. XML is how we are providing that modeling data that we're going to use to either get information from the device or to configure the device. Now, if you didn't see that running, what could you do? You could go into global config and you could say netconf-yang and hit enter, and that should allow that should start up the nccSSHD and get you going. And actually, you could even throw some session variables on here, so we could put in IPv4 configuration parameters, so forth and so on. You can configure the features, right? And candidate data store, you do not want to run that, or that will break what we are going to be attempting to do. And so, again, they just wanted to show you how you would dive in there if, for whatever reason, the process wasn't running. You could jump in there and type in the netconf-yang and kick it off. So let's get out of here, because we are going to be coming back to that in just a second. Now, I'm also, whoops, sorry about that. I am also on, I've got to flip back and forth here to get to this screen here. So you can see that I was just on the device, and if I hit enter, there we are, CSR1kv. So this is the console for the CSR1kv virtual machine. Again, for the course, we're going to be running Gibraltar 16.12.05. That is the latest and greatest Gibraltar train of code for the CSR1kv. All right, so back over here. Now, let's dive into some of the things that they want us to do. So what we're going to start with here, and again, I love how they do a very incremental walk-up here. So what they want us to do first is they want us to SSH back to that device. I can probably pull this back up. And they want us to specify the port number to which we want to connect. Again, the nccSSHD process is running on port 830. The server is running on port 830, which would allow me to connect via NETCONF. And so I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. You can see it once the password. We'll type in Cisco123 exclamation mark. And what do we get? Well, we get a list of a whole bunch of capabilities. And you can see if you like XML, you're really going to like NETCONF. We get a list of all these capabilities. But more importantly, we're actually in an interactive NETCONF session on the router right now. You can see our session ID is 103. And we're getting this hello, right? And this right here, that is not part of the XML, right? This is more, think of it as just like a prompt, right? And that's going to tell us that, hey, you know, you're kind of in this interactive session in NETCONF. How can we confirm that? Well, if I step back over here, take a look at what we've got. We've got this DMI5 auth passed, and you can see user Cisco authenticated successfully from this IP address. That is my iMac IP address that the DEVASC virtual machine is using, and that is not the server port number, but that's the random high port number that came off of the DEVASC virtual machine, and we are connected via NETCONF, right? You can see for NETCONF over SSH, and it knows that because we use those options. So I actually have all of the XML that they're going to be asking us to cut and paste in here to save us a whole bunch of time. I've got that queued up. So what do we have here, right? So we have connected interactively to the CSR1kv using NETCONF, and it gives us a list of all of these great capabilities that the CSR1kv has. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and sort of kick off this interactive session. And on step 3, what they want us to do is we're going to go ahead and cut and paste the following SSH code in to list out some capability or specific capability here. So let's click over here. And as you can see, we're all queued up here. So we're going to say more, or let's just cat it out actually. It's tiny here, but it'll be larger on the screen. So P2S3.xml. And so here is this little code they want us to drop in here. And let's make sure we get everything right up to that. All right. So we'll pop over to the other screen where we're going to paste this in. There we go. And we should see that the capabilities get returned. And actually, let me paste this in one more time here. There we go. Okay. So that's what I was hoping to get. Excuse me. And when you're working with the CSR1kv image and you're working with NETCONF, don't be afraid to hit enter maybe a few times and then type back in or paste back in what you were trying to get. And you can see here what we're seeing is, it looks like we're getting an error code, but we are getting some output below. And again, this sometimes can happen. So we're going to leave that the way it is right there. We'll circle back to that. But if we come back over to the CSR1kv and we go from user exec into privilege exec, if I say show netconf Yang sessions, it should show that, yeah, there you go. There's that session 103 that we started, right? And it gives us the information as to where we're connecting to. But again, when we kicked open that capabilities, yeah, we get the error, but we are seeing that we are connected. And so really the takeaway is they want you to show that you're connected. However, it would have been nice to see some additional information there. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to paste in another XML. It's going to be P2S4A. So let me cat that out. P2S4A, and that's just part 2, step 4 of the lab. Step A is kind of the sub-step. And let's go ahead and try to get this information with our, with our netconf, or I'm sorry, with our XML configuration here. So we'll copy that. We'll come down here, we'll paste it in, and there we go. That's what we would expect to see, right? We would expect to get all of that back. Again, on the previous capability, yeah, I'm at a loss as to why it kicked out that error. But we'll drive on here because, as you can see, this is functioning, and we used the get. And if I was to switch back over here, I know it's really tiny in here, but you can see right there, we're using the get, and we're using a filter, and that filter trims down. It doesn't look like it from what we're seeing, but it does kind of trim things down on the interfaces, right? So we're saying, hey, filter based off of the interfaces. Now, your output is probably going to vary significantly because I have a ton of loopback interfaces configured for something that we're going to be looking at a bit later here. So again, we pasted in this XML and we got back exactly what we anticipated, which was a ton of information. Now, again, I am not a fan of XML by any stretch of the imagination because I cannot stand all of the tags. However, what we could do is we could grab all of this output here. Remember, we're interactively interfacing with the CSR1kv using XML code. So we can copy all of this XML code and we can come over here. You can Google, there's a million of these sites out there. XML pretty print, let's use that here. So what happens if I paste all of that XML code in here and I use this, pretty XML and take a look at, prints it out, and it puts it into a stylized, formatted output, very similar to JSON view that we saw in Module 4, when we could take sort of the raw JSON output, cut and paste it into our Chromium web browser here, and it would look very, very pretty for us. Now, with JSON, yes, I think it looks really pretty when we take it from the raw format and we drop it into the formatted, right? The sort of the JSON view format where it's all formatted out really nicely. Unfortunately, the analogy I'm going to use here is with XML, it's like trying to put lipstick onto a pig. It is, I just don't think it looks any prettier than it did in its raw format. I'm joking there, but again, not a fan of XML data just because of all the tags. So, but that's what XML Pretty can do. And take a look, it's going to show us all of this information we've got configured here, right? All of these loopback IP addresses that are configured. And then you could maybe parse that down even further. Okay, so again, we're interactively interfacing here, walking up to what it would look like if we were using some scripts. So since we're interactively interfacing, Just like if you were opening a file using sort of the old school method, you have to tell Python to close that file down so that we don't get inconsistent results. And with an interactive NetConf session, the same is true. So I would have to come up here and say, we'll cat out P2S5. And this is the code. Again, this is going to get much larger when we pipe it into the other terminal window here. And I'm going to have to tell the interactive NetConf session to close. Now, we're going to wait a couple seconds. And again, you got to be patient when we're doing this, especially, and there you go, especially depending on the resources you've got available on your system. And so we have closed down that session. So now if I come back over here, we should see that if I rerun the show netconf yang sessions, there are no active sessions. And so that's really part 2 of the lab, where they want us to kind of do this from the CLI to see what's actually going to be taking place kind of behind the scenes when we start using scripts. Now, on our DEVASC virtual machine, they want us to make sure that we've got the and we'll say ... format, and it's definitely on here. Columns, and then pipe it to more. And we're looking for the NC client. And it looks like we're going to go alphabetical here, and NC client is on here. Be sure you check this, right, to make sure that it's installed on your system. If it's not, you just type pip3 install NC client, and that's going to get it installed on there. All right, so now we're going to create a script that's going to connect up. It's going to do the connection for us, right? So instead of me having to type SSH Cisco at 192.168.1.129 and then the -P with the port number and the -S to specify NetConf, we're going to go ahead and we're going to automate all of this. And it's very, very cool, right? So let's take a look at the first. And there's 2 here, and I want the NC client. Let's take a look at the first Python script. Now, I've got some stuff down here in the bottom. I'm going to talk about that in a second that relates to having to close the session. So take a look here. This is really all the first lab is importing, right? So from the NC client library, I'm going to import manager. And the manager class has a connect method. And so we are just, think of it like this. I'm managing my connection to this CSR1kv. And we are doing it, we're going to be using NetConf. Now, what do we have here? Well, there's the host, there's the port number, the username, the password, and I'm not checking the SSH key. And this right here, whoops, sorry, that little, the little M right here, right? That's the variable name that we're using. So we're creating a manager connect object that will have the name M, and that is going to automate our connection to the CSR1kv. Now, you might also see something like this. And remember, I talked about opening a file, right? And we had to specifically state, close the file down. Well, remember, you could say with open and open the file up as some variable name or the object name of the file object, but it's going to auto-magically close the file down for you. So you might see, if you're looking around on the internet or trying to come up with some ideas, that you can do with Manager Connect. And this will open and auto-magically close the NetConf, the interactive SSH NetConf session for you, just like we did with the files, right? So just keep that in mind. There's always more than one way to do things. We're going to start out slow by using sort of, and you could think of this as the old school, even though, you know, it's not old school per se, but think of that as the old school approach where, yeah, we're going to have to open it up and we're going to have to probably manually close it. Whereas down here, if I said with manager.connect, then it's going to open it and you can see as M and off it goes. It does what it's going to do and it's going to close everything down for us. All right. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to run this, right? So let's go ahead and let's say Python 3. And actually, let me just pull that back up right there. And we'll say Python 3 and I hit enter. And you can see that like nothing happens. But if I pop back over here, take a look, right? So we just connected in as the user Cisco. So if I was to say show NetConf Yang sessions, there are no sessions, right? Because remember, it connected and then that was it. How do we know that? Well, if I was to step back over here and run that again and run it again and run it again and come over here, we're going to see that we've got the connection being made. It looks like I may have ran it too fast, but the connections are being made. Again, let's give it some time here. And I'm hoping that I didn't break. There we go. And so then it pops up and you can see that it's running. And so again, takes a few seconds to close down. The with is using with manager.connect is probably preferred. But again, this is going to work. It's going to do exactly what we need it to do. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's take a look at an alternative here. And I showed you how to use with. So here's an alt way to do it. And what are we doing here? Well, if I come back up here, let's use this with.connect. So again, here you would define all of the variables that we're going to need, the IP of the CSR1kv, the port number, the username, the password, and then we run the manager.connect. And what is this what is this code doing? Well, if you take a look at this code, we are going to cycle through using our XML data variable here, and we're using our Yang modeling that uses this XML filter that is going to get me all of the interfaces, and specifically, I want the loopback interfaces. So this code should give me, again, all of the interfaces that start with loopback. And so let's run this code and see what happens. And again, this is just showing you the with manager.connect, opening up that SSH connection to interface with the NetConf server as the object name M. And so we'll say Python 3. And as you can see, we've got quite a few loopbacks. And actually, I'm going to show you the code to create a bunch of loopbacks because at the end of the lab, we want to extend the capabilities of what we're doing. All right, so that's us connecting up with NetConf and using sort of and again, I'll just say, one way and then the other way, right? Without the with statement and then with the with statement. So let's take a look at without the with statement, where we want to list out the capabilities, right? And again, I could do this from the interactive session, but let's script it, right? It's easier to script it because then I can just simply run it again and again and again. So I'm going to connect in and I'm going to say print supported capabilities, Yang models, and for capability in m.server, right? So I have this NetConf ncclient manager object, and that object has attributes. And one of those attributes is server_capabilities. And what is that attribute going to tell me? It's going to tell me all the attributes of that object. And let's see what those attributes are. And here we go, right? So there's all of the attributes. And there's a ton of stuff here, right? And again, it's going to show me what is supported here via the ncclient module, right? So pretty cool. All right, so now that we know that, we can, and in fact, if I reran that again, if I grep minus I on get, this just popped into my head here. Yeah, so it just shows target. So what we're going to be using is we're going to be using the get_config method that is inextricably linked to our object. And let's go ahead and take a look at how we would do that. So again, we're just kind of working our way through the lab here, building little by little. And as you can see, what I do is I do like one file, get it working. Then we do another file, we add some code and we get it working. Then I do another file and we add some new code. So here we're going to say, okay, well, I'm going to create a variable called netconf_reply. And in that variable, I'm going to save the output I get from using my object, right? My ncclient.manager.connect object. And I'm going to use the getConfig method. Here we get the capabilities. Here, I'm going to get the configuration using the method. And what am I trying to get? I'm trying to get the running config. So this is how easy with NetConf it is to get the running config. And so let's go ahead and let's run this. And then again, we print the running config obviously there at the end. So I'll say Python 3, and it's going to print the capabilities, and we should see that fly to the screen. And that is our configuration. And again, if I was to kind of fly back up here, we should run into all of that uniform resource naming convention stuff. And boy, there's way too much in this config here. I'm just going to keep going. There we go. Okay. So, and there you can see, wait, did I have it commented? Oh, okay. So the capabilities I commented out there. Sorry. I'm glad that's commented out because we didn't want to see that. So here's all of that XML data that represents the running config, right? And so we run it. So now what they want to do is it's not formatted. So what you could do is you could grab this. And again, I refer to this as putting lipstick on a pig. It is not going to make that pig look any better. And so we're going to grab all of this and hopefully not overrun the copy paste buffer that we've got. And I'm going to say copy. And then we're going to come over here to the XML pretty. And let's, we don't want to load previous. Let's dump that. Let's clear the screen here and let's dump in our new XML data and then take a look over here. So this is the full configuration, the full running config for this CSR1kv. There's my version 16.12, right? You can see that we've got banner MOTD is not set. Email address is in here for some stuff, right? But then more importantly, we're going to have all of these loopback addresses. So we get into the address, and that's why I was creating them, is so we'd have a rich set of data with which to kind of look at it and examine it. So that's everything there. And so again, that is how easy it is with a Python script to pull the running config and get it in XML format for whatever reason, right? If you're going to use it to do whatever. So now, again, they have us manually cutting and pasting and dragging it over to this website. Wouldn't it be great if there was a way to do that auto-magically? And there is. So let's clear the screen and we'll say more 004. And we are going to prettify, we're going to prettify the XML code. And so how do we do that? Again, you can see this is commented out here, right? Because we don't need to see the capabilities again. And I commented out printing the NetConf reply because now we're going to capture in the variable netconf_reply the running config, and we're going to use our print function here, and we're going to use this XML domain mini-dom parse string, and we're going to use a function that is part of that method, or off of that parse string method, we're going to use this toPrettyXML function to basically take our XML and prettify it, or format it, basically is what we're doing. So let's go ahead and run the script, and we'll say Python 3, and it's going to give us everything that we just saw in the web browser in a formatted output. Now, again, the practicality of this on the screen here to the terminal might not be the best thing, but it shows us like, okay, we can get this in a formatted XML format. So now let's take a look at the next step that the lab wants us to do. And that is, again, that was the whole configuration, right? Maybe we don't want the whole configuration. Maybe I want to filter down and I only want to see the native, a portion of the running config, which is just sort of the native Yang information, or I should say the native Yang modeling information that we would get. And this is how I can filter that output down, is I create a variable called netconf_filter. Now remember, this is more of like we're quoting, think of it like we're kind of quoting a string. It's not kind of commenting it out. It's this multi-line XML. And the reason that we need the triple quotes here is because it's multi-line, right? What we're getting is multi-line. If it was just, you know, this tag filter or just that tag there, then I could squeeze it into one line, we're okay. But here we want to do the multi-line look at things, this XML code, which is why we got the triple quotes. So again, we're not commenting that out. We're making sure we're getting the netconf underscore filter variable as a multi-line representation of that XML data. And then down here, you can see what do we do. So now our netconf reply is going to be get me the config, right? We're using the get underscore config method that is inextricably linked to our SSH netconf session object, that manager connect object. And I'm saying, yeah, give me the running config, but now we extend it out. I'm filtering what I want to get back. And what am I filtering it on? That netconf underscore filter variable, which is representative of that XML code right there. And then we're going to do our little lipstick on a pig to pretty XML. So let's go ahead and let's run this and see what we get. So I'm simply going to come down here. We're going to say Python 3, hit enter. And you might not think it's any different, but it is, because there is that native tag. And if I scroll back up here, you can see we're just getting that native data. And again, this is probably going to go up here for a little while longer with all the loopback addresses, but it's giving us the native data that we filtered on, right? And that's what we wanted to see. All right, so we saved our program, we ran the program, and so again, we saw the closing native tag. I don't want to go all the way back up to the beginning native tag. But again, it only includes a subset of all the Cisco iOS XE Yang models, right? And it's that native subset. That is what we're getting. All right, so now we're going to step up our game here. We're going to configure the router. And so let's take a look at 006. And again, this is just my naming convention here to kind of more easily dial these things in for our demos. Okay, so what are we doing? We've got a bunch of stuff commented out up here, right? The capabilities are commented out. We still have the netconf underscore filter, but now we've got this new variable name, netconf underscore hostname. And here's the XML code, the multi-line XML code in order to put in some new hostname. And that's what it is. The hostname that's going to show up with is some net, I think I have some net whose name or whatever. So it's going to have that as the new host name. And so in order to do that, we don't say m.getConfig, right? Which we did when we were using the netconf filter in order to filter out what we wanted to see. Here, I'm saying the object name dot, and we're using the edit underscore config method. And what am I targeting to edit? The running config. And then what is the config I want to change? Well, it's the netconf underscore hostname. And so here is how the hostname is modeled, right? So we talk about model-driven programmability. That is how, with netconf in the XML code, the hostname is modeled. And so if I know how it's modeled, then all I need to do is drop in how it's modeled, change what I want that model to be, how it's represented with the new host name here, and then I'm going to run this m.editConfig, and I give it the XML netconf modeled data to change the host name. And that is it, right? That's all we're doing here, is we're saying, how is the host name modeled in the config section? That's exactly how the host name is modeled. How can I change it? Well, I'm just going to jump in here and I'm going to change the name. And again, if we were to fly, and I'm actually in VI, we should have, it's not letting me go up higher. If we were to go back up higher in all that, pretty XML, in fact, if I came over here, if we were to try to find in here, and actually I don't even know how to search in here. So, and maybe if I do Control F, maybe that would work, and we'll say host name. It's not going to let me do it in the config. But in here somewhere, right, in all of this XML that we've got in here, somewhere in the config section is that code that we're looking at, like the platform code, right? Oh, wait, there it is right there. Boom, host name. Stumbled upon that. So that was just dumb luck. So there it is. In the config section between the hostname tags is the hostname. And that is all we are doing over here, right? We're saying that, yeah, in the config section for the native XMLS, and that's the modeling piece, is there's going to be a hostname tag, a set of hostname tags with the hostname in it. We're changing that. And here's how we would do that. So let's clear the screen. And again, it's going to do the too pretty thing. So let me go ahead and say Python 3. And off we go. And you can see the lab shows you that you might get something back that shows you, oh yeah, new hostname created, right? So we're just getting back okay. Again, the NetConf implementations are all going to sort of behave maybe a little bit differently, but this is how you change the hostname. And again, I think actually the lab does show okay, but it shows your messages are probably going to be different than what I'm getting, but it does show the okay, right? So, all right, fantastic. How can I confirm that the host name has changed? Well, all we need to do for that is come over here and take a look, and you can see right there, right? It shows me March, the time, transaction ID configured from netconf, restconf. But again, we're using netconf, and we get the transaction ID. So now when I hit enter a few times, the host name is no longer CSR1kv. It was supposed to say some new host name, but it says some whatever, right? So we get that new host name. So that shows that what we just did worked. Absolutely fantastic. So as ugly as XML is, it's pretty simple to get in here and run that configuration. All right, so now we want to update the loopback address. And specifically, they want us to tweak the loopback1 address, I believe is the address we're messing with here. Yeah, the loopback1. So let me go ahead and clear the screen here. And I'm going to manually change something because right now, I think if we get into privilege exec and I say show IP interface brief, loopback1 is, oh yeah, it is some random address. Okay, so it's like this 132 address. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't already the 10111 that we're going to be using. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's take a look at 007, which is us configuring the loopback address. How do we do that? Well, what would the XML code look like around the loopback address? Well, it's going to be in the config section. It's going to be under the interfaces. It's going to be under loopback. It's going to be under loopback1. It's going to have a description. It's going to have an IP address, right? And so if I was to grab this code, you can see that one of the nice things with XML is it doesn't matter if it's pretty or indented or whatever. The white space is kind of ignored. So this is going to work, right? Me just having all of my tags jammed up here. But if I grab that and we wanted to see what that looked like if it was pretty or prettier, that's what it would look like. And so this is how we kind of, you nest down into all of that, these the XML tags, and this is how we would set the address. So again, I find the code that would be required, the XML code to where that address is at, and then I want to change that address. This is how I would do that, right? So I create this netconf underscore loopback variable name that has this multi-line XML code that follows the Yang modeling description for netconf for the CSR1kv, and we've got, what am I looking for? Yeah, right here is I'm going to capture the netconf reply is now capturing an edit config, right? We're editing the running config, and we're changing the loopback address. Because again, if we were to go dig into the XML right now, it's got that 132 address. And then we're going to print out in pretty format all of the wonderful XML code that we have for this activity. So I'm just going to fire myself back here. We're going to say Python 3. I'm going to hit enter. And as you can see right there, oh, and actually it did not print anything out because netconf reply. Yeah, so it didn't print it out because we are in the interactive, or I shouldn't say interactive, it didn't print out. So I was hoping that it would print it out, but it just gave us... Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking it was going to print all the XML out. What it's printing out is what the NetConf reply, what we get back from the CSR1kv NETCONF reply to us, which is right here. Okay, and then you see it's okay. So let's step over here. I apologize there. I was anticipating, oh, we're going to get all the XML back again, but we don't. So take a look at right here, right? Something was just configured, and we got a transaction ID, the whole 9 yards. And so let's go ahead and say show IP interface brief. Loopback 1, the IP address has changed. It is 10.1.1.1. You can see it up there toward the top, right up there at the very, very top. And so that's how easy it is to manipulate an iOS XE device using NetConf. And again, NetConf is using SSH, which is why we got all those SSH parameters up there. So now it says attempt to create a new loopback with the same address. And I think I should be able to do that. Was it part 6? I'm trying to remember where I snatched or where I put that code away there. So I think we could rerun the same script. And let's try to rerun the same script. And it says okay. And what do we see over here? And let's do show IP interface brief. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not sure. Yeah, so it wanted us to try to attempt, and we should have seen an error, as I think what they're anticipating is we're going to get an error back because the loopback was already the same. And we didn't see an error come back. And I'm wondering if I did not do, it's possible that I did not do a script for that. Or what's 008? Let me see 008. Okay, so it looks like, right. Sorry, so 008 is the lab I had for that. So here we go. I apologize there. A lot of files that we're handling here. Okay, so we're going to try to create another loopback, right? And actually it should have been loopback. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so new loopback. I'm sorry. So that code that was in there was still in there for the loopback 1, but I'm not using that. We're going to be using this NetConf new loopback. And so what am I doing down here? So again, the lines that begin with pound signs, that's commented out. So I'm going to try to configure loopback 2 using the same IP address. So how do we do that? Let's run this script. Again, we just defined a new variable name called netconf_new loopback, and we put the exact same code in there with the exception of the name of the loopback, where we changed that to loopback 2. So let's say Python 3, let's try to run this. And hold on one second there. That should not have worked. And let me take a look at the code here real quick, and it's possible we've got an error in there somewhere. All right, so there's the new config loopback. Oh, that's netconf loopback. There's the new loopback. And you can see the name of the loopback is 2. We should have received an error there because we should not be able to do that. Let's run that again. Yeah, and we are not seeing the error. Show IP interface brief. So it allowed us to do that. It should, let me check, was the netmask wrong? It should not allow us. We should have gotten an error when we ran that. Again, I'll probably have to take a look at why we didn't get the error when we ran that, because that should have generated an error for us saying that the device refused one or more commands. All right, so for that part right now, we're just going to have to accept things and move on. So now you got the challenge activity, right? And so for the challenge, it said, you know, try to change things up and configure some more stuff. So here's what this is how I'm generating these random loopbacks, right? So here's the code to do that. And you can see that we've got the device up there. So now we've got this RPC, remote procedure call, where I've got some random Python code or code down here that's going to create random loopbacks for me, right? And so you can see the range right there was 605 to 608. Now you got to be careful here. You might think, oh, well, I'm going to create 1,000 loopback addresses. Well, chances are you're going to get an error when you do that because you're trying to do too much. So if I said, let's create 705 to 708, again, it's going to be random IP addresses for those loopbacks. I'm going to run this code. We're going to say Python 3. And we should get the OK back saying that it's created those loopback addresses. And of course, now it wants to say inconsistent. So now this error here, right? When if you do the random thing, it might be because you're trying to do too much. And for whatever reason, the system just chokes, right? So I'm going to try to run it again. And again, sometimes we see that, but sometimes it actually works. Interface brief. And let's see, did we get, okay, we didn't get the 700. So let me try to shrink down then the amount of loopbacks. I'll go to 707. And we'll run it again. And see there, right? And it works. So I try to create too many loopback addresses. Oftentimes you're going to get that RPC error where it just chokes, right? But here it worked. So now if we come back over here and I say show IP interface brief, and I think it's just you're giving it too much to do. And there at the very bottom is loopback 705 and 706 with random IP addresses. And so that's how, one thing that you could do to sort of extend the functionality of the program that's used in the lab. And again, at the end of the lab, it actually gives you all of the code that's been run to that point. All right, well, we absolutely crushed it here with using NetConf to access and configure and list out the configuration of a Cisco iOS XE device. We covered a ton of ground. We looked at how we create the Manager.Connect object. We looked at some methods on the Manager.Connect object, like get config, edit config. And then we looked at how we could take all that XML and dump it and make it pretty into that web page, or automate it and use the toPrettyXML function that was part of that XML library that we had imported. All right, well, hopefully this cleared things up for you. Remember, with NetConf, it's all about XML. It's all about SSH. That's how it's different from RESTconf, which we're now going to dive into in Lab 837. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Appreciate your time. Hopefully I have earned your time here in this video, and I hope to see you in the next video.